Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together, we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to us. And also check us out on Instagram and Facebook to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Paul, I know we've got a guest coming out, Sherrie Dunlevy, that you're familiar with, and she's going to talk about grief today. So it's going to be maybe a lower energy episode, but I think what she's going to bring to the table is going to be pretty important to talk about, man.
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, it's going to be more of a lower energy topic, but I think it's a topic that we need to handle because all of us have to go through grief. Every single one of us has to go through grief. Yeah. And Sherrie, unfortunately, lost a child as a very, very young infant. And they say that's one of the hardest things to go through is to lose a child. You have a daughter, Justin, and I don't even think you want to go there, right? I mean, it's a horrible, horrible thought. Yeah. And there's so many people that have to deal with it and move forward. And a lot of these questions we'll ask Sherrie on how to handle that, because it's definitely not easy, and it's something you will never get over. But you have to find a way to continue to live your life. Even just to honor your child who passed, to live your life. I've lost my father. I mean, that was hard for me. But I would imagine that losing a child be worse because, biologically, I'm supposed to lose my father. I'm supposed to lose my parents first before I'm supposed to go. That's just biology in your head. So, it's just a hard topic that I feel like we need to take on.
Yeah. Like you said, eventually all of us are going to deal with grief. No one really wants to think about the loss of a child or even the loss of your parents. But yeah, even you talking about that, I don't even want to imagine that. Like I can't even put myself in that place of losing a child. So it'll be an interesting conversation. I'm sure that she's going to have a lot of insight on how to deal with that and pushing through that. So I'm excited to bring her out and pick her brain on how to deal with grief and how she helps other people push through to the other side. So I said we go ahead and bring her out. So Sherrie Dunlevy is a best-selling author of the book, How Can I Help? She's a speaker, podcast host, and bereaved mom. This former radio talk show host and TV news anchor now is dedicated to helping women graduate from their grief and show those who love them amazing ways to offer love and support. So everyone, welcome Sherrie Dunlevy to the show. Sherrie, so glad to have you here on the Actions Limits podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, guys, thank you. It's my pleasure.
I know you've had a conversation with Paul before because he was on your podcast, and I know he's excited to start off the interview. So go ahead, Paul. We're really excited to hear from you, Sherrie.
Sherrie, obviously the type of coaching that you do, you weren't born doing that coaching. So can you kind of go into your story a little bit and elaborate why you are the coach you are?
Well, sure. I was a television news anchor and a radio talk host for many years, almost 3 decades, actually. And it was when I was a television news anchor that my husband and I were expecting our second son, and he died. He lived for a month and then he died. And so I had this new experience as a bereaved mom. I also had a 3-year-old at home. And I found out that during this time, people will abandon you. So that's where it first started, because my husband and I had a couple of friends that just kind of didn't show up for us. Although we were loved and lifted up and supported immensely through this, it wasn't until 6 years later that one of the friends that backed out of our lives at this time, just called and wanted to catch up. And after that phone call, I thought, wow, what was that about? Like, why do they want to catch up now when they weren't there, all along? And that got me to start thinking about that question. Why aren't people there? And as I was talking to other people, I realized it doesn't happen just in grief. It can happen in divorce. It can happen when you're diagnosed with an illness. It can happen when you lose your job. It can happen because you're different than other people. People just feel uncomfortable. And when they feel uncomfortable, a lot of times, instead of stepping up to the plate, they back away. Mm. And so that's when I decided that I would write my book, How Can I Help? And so that's pretty much what I was doing. But I also at the same time was trying to heal from this grief, right? And as I wrote this book, I started doing a lot of personal development, and I realized I was healing and not just living my life, but I was starting to thrive. I was starting to change my mind. I was starting to be happy again. I was starting to step into like this amazing new person that I didn't think was ever possible. And it took me 15 years to do that. And I don't want it to take people 15 years to step into that. I want to help them do that when they feel they're ready. Because you see, about 18 months after I lost my son, I left my support group just because I was tired of feeling horribly depressed and sad every other Tuesday night of the month, and that showed me that I was ready to start healing and stepping back into life, but I had nowhere else to go. So I was thinking about that during this pandemic. Well, what was that feeling? And it was like I was ready to graduate to the next level, but there was no next level. So that's what I thought. There's so many people during this pandemic who are grieving all of these things that I talk about in my book. And a lot of people are now going online into support groups. And what I'm finding is that while people mean well, there are a lot of people in those groups that will tell these people they'll never be happy again, that their life is forever going to be changed, that the sun will never shine again, and that you will be miserable the rest of your life. And I thought, it's just not true. It's just not true. And so that's kind of why I started Graduating Grief, loving your life after loss. And it doesn't matter if it's the loss of a loved one through death, or if you've been divorced, or if it's because your kids left the nest because they, went off to college. It doesn't matter. Your life doesn't have to stop. And your life it will be different and it will change, but it still can be fabulous.
Wow. That's pretty powerful, Sherrie. I have so many questions in there, and I'm sure that you've addressed all of them, in your book. But the one that really pops out at me is like the support system around you. What have you found for those people that have stepped away because they can't handle someone else's loss? How can we be a good support group for people that have had that type of loss?
Well, maybe we should back it up and start with perhaps why people do back out.
Sure.
I think that in my case, we lost a child, and most people, our friends, were of the age where they were having children. So this was the most horrifying thought they could think of. So horrifying that to even be near us brought up feelings that were terribly uncomfortable for them, right? And so because they couldn't deal with that, they couldn't deal with us. So it was more about them. And, then it really truly was about us. The
Sure.
second thing is that I think that there are times when people literally don't know what to do or say. I mean, I remember when a girlfriend of mine in college lost her mother. I had never even I lost a grandfather, I think, by that time, but I had no idea what that was like. I was kind and I was sorry about your loss, but I certainly didn't show up for her in a way that she needed it because I
Mhm.
didn't know, right? And then the third type is the person that wants to say or do something, wants to make this better, but they're so afraid that what they're going to say is wrong or it's going to make it worse.
Mhm.
So better to err on the side of caution and not say anything. So what I tell people is, first of all, it's not about you, it's about them. So the second thing is there's no miracle phrase or action that you can do that's going to make this all right, that's going to reverse this. But there are things that you can do that can show people the love and support that they need. And that's what I try to do. You know, I try to help them step up and be the friend they want to be, that they need to be, and that their friends need them to be.
So how do you what's a way to approach that? So what are some of those things that we need to say? Because to me, a friend of mine, they lost one of their parents and I haven't. So I'm in a similar place there, right? Where I don't have that connection. And it's, it feels okay to say, I don't know what to say to you. It's like, I don't know where you've been. I don't know what you're feeling, but I'm here for you.
Perfect. You couldn't have said it any better. You couldn't have said it any better. That's all they want to know.
Mhm.
You don't know how they feel. You can't even imagine the pain they're going through. But I'm here for you. I'm going to sit with you. I'm here for you, And during this pandemic, that's been challenging because it's not like you can plop down on their couch with them,
Sure.
right? But I recently, my newest loss, which was a very, very, very deep loss that I'm still grieving, I lost my dog.
Mm.
Uh, Unexpectedly, he was my baby that let me nurture him, the baby that I couldn't nurture, right? And it has been absolutely devastating. And I had friends that texted me. I had friends that voicemailed me. I had friends that sent me cards. I had friends that, I didn't feel like talking to any of them, but they left me messages and I listened to every single one of those messages. And then they called me back and they left another message. And then they called me back and then I answered, right? You're never one and done with this.
Mm.
This is a journey. So don't think that, like prayers, that praying hand emoji, on Facebook is enough, unless that's the kind of friend you want to be. While I appreciate that, it was the people that were like, girl, I got you. I can't even imagine. I know how attached you were. This can't be easy. I'm here. I know you don't feel like talking, but if you do, I'm here. And I always tell people, hey, my ears work. I have ears that listen and a shoulder you can cry on, and I'll offer both if you want them, right? But we have technology, we have FaceTime, we have Zoom, we have all kinds of ways that we can reach out to people and let them know they're loved, cared about, and supported through this.
Sherrie, what about the guilt factor? I imagine that you probably went through this in your life where, you're at the point where I want to get my life going again, but that guilt of, what, I can't be happy because my child has died and I can't have that back. So I don't deserve to be happy. I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel that way. How do you get over that?
Oh, that one is a tough one. And a lot of times, I didn't necessarily have the guilt as much as I felt like I had to live this perfect life if I ever wanted to be reunited with my son. Like I knew that he was in heaven and I felt like if I wanted to ever see him again, I had to lead this perfect life. And that was a lot of pressure that I put on myself. There are all these ways that your brain tries to make you process this. I want to help people with that guilt. What if this was the amount of days that they were supposed to live? What if if that is, and even if you just cling on to that, and what if by you living your life, you're keeping them alive? You're keeping their memory alive. I'm talking to you about my son 22 years after he died, and my son never made it out of the hospital, right? But yet people still know about him. I'm keeping him alive by the way I'm living my life. But I also think that you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision that you're going to heal. When I was a TV reporter, I did a story on a woman who lost her daughter in a flash flood. And then 4 or 5 years later, I did another story where they found a woman's body at the bank of the river where they pulled her daughter out. And it was that same woman. And when I lost my son, I thought, I don't want to be her. I had to decide that I was going to move on, this was Brandon's death, life and death was a chapter in the life of Sherrie Dunlevy, but it wasn't Sherrie Dunlevy's life. And I don't want to get to the end of my life and answer to God when he says, well, what did you do with that extra 50 years I gave you, Sherrie? And I don't want to say to him, I laid down and pulled the covers over my head and cried for 50 years because you took my son. I wanted to say, you made me stronger. You gave me this beautiful boy. You blessed me to be his mother. And now I want to bless others who are maybe having a tough time. I want to honor this life that I've been given.
What do you see as I know this is the wrong words, but I don't want to say distractions, but what do you see that what people do to occupy their mind so that they can move forward in their life? Is it normally changing their career? Or is it travel? Is it meeting new friends? What is the pattern you're seeing with people that, are at that point that once you graduate from grief, what do they do?
Well, the one thing they want to do is they want to start feeling better. They're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. So I don't know. It depends on what you want to do. I want to travel. That hasn't been possible in this past year, right? So that hasn't been an option for me. But I've been creating vision boards of all the places that I want to travel. I'm making space for this in a room. I'm looking with great anticipation. I think you have to figure out what it is that you want. A lot of times it might be switching careers. A lot of times it might be going back to school. One of the things that we did was moved in that first year. There are a lot of people that say you shouldn't do this X, Y, and Z in your first year of grieving. But my husband and I moved states and moved neighborhoods and moved states in that first year because we wanted children around so that our 3-year-old would have children to grow up with if he wasn't going to have a sibling. And the neighborhood we lived in didn't, so you have to decide what you want your life to be. One of the things I think people get caught up in, and believe me, this is graduating your grief. This is not early grief. You've got to do your work. You've got to find your way through this through your support groups. And mine helped me wonderfully. I mean, I did support groups, I did Bible studies, I did personal development courses, I did something called the grief recovery method. I was constantly looking for ways to help me feel better and move forward, right? But you have to do that work. You can't just get through this in 15 minutes or 2 weeks or even a year, right? It takes time and it takes hard work. But if you want to move through, you've got to move away from the why did this happen and why my son and why me and my husband and why my family. And I had to move into, this is what it is. So what now? How do we want to move forward as a family of 3 instead of a family of 4? How's that going to look like? What do we want to do? And so we just started looking at things that, okay, this is how it's going to be. This is the direction we're going to move in. And we're going to be okay with that because I can either be okay with it or not be okay with it. being okay with it means that I'm going to move in a healthy direction. Not being okay, and it keeps me in a cycle of suffering.
Hmm. So is the graduating the grief, is that like the final step? Is that just like once you get to a certain point? Is that how you're approaching it with your clients?
I'm approaching it to the fact that once, here's what happened when I went to my, like I said, when I went to my support group, I knew that I just didn't want to feel this anymore. I didn't want to feel that deep sorrow. I wanted to start feeling like Sherrie again. How can I do that? Who can help me do that? Who can help me process the guilt? Who can help me process the fear? Who can help me with the anxiety, of what that looks like? Of I needed support. I needed encouragement. I needed tools. And
Okay.
that's what I want to provide for people.
Okay.
Talk to me about your son, your 3-year-old son, because I'm sure he really didn't understand what was really going on, and you grieving and your husband grieving, and you knowing that you still had to take care of him, and he had feelings and he was questioning. How did you deal with that?
That was very challenging because my son was 2 while I was pregnant. And so we were gone a lot because we knew that there were complications. So we had been going to um, children's hospitals up and down the East Coast trying to figure out what we could do, if we were going to have surgery in utero, if we weren't, what our game plan was, and we had meetings with, I remember leaving the day after Christmas for Philadelphia just because that's what we had to do. And so, he saw mommy, and everybody would tell me mommy had a baby growing in him, but yet when Brandon was born, because he was only 2, soon to be 3, he was not allowed in the hospital. So he never got to see his brother. And then his brother died, and we had a funeral, but we didn't have a viewing. So he never got to see him. So it was just very, very strange. And then he turned 3 8 days before Brandon died. And so it was a very challenging time. I often wonder how this affected him, but I was very conscientious in how I was grieving because I did not want my son's earliest memories to be of his mommy always being sad. I didn't want him thinking mommy could never be happy with me because she was always sad because she didn't have Brandon, right? And so I had to be very conscious. So I did a lot of crying in the shower. We had family that took care of him. I tried to go back to work in the news business. That didn't work out too well. But, from what I don't know how we did it. He didn't really have a lot of questions at the time. And we were always told, answer the questions when asked, but he never really asked them. So trying to explain to a child that young what happened was just very kind of odd. So we just always tried to be present for him in his life where he was.
Sure. And that's a tough thing too, when you realize that you're hurting, you need, some self-care, but you have other people, your son to take care of. It's always a difficult thing for parents to realize. It's like, hey, I need to fix what's going on with me, but also figure out how to take care of the people around me. And it seems like a lot of the times that the self-care takes a back seat um, when there are other people that depend on you.
I always compare it to being, I always said I put my grief on the back burner, like on the back burner of the stove, just to
Mm.
simmer. And it simmered for years and years and years. And honestly, I really never properly dealt with it until my son Trey grew up and was getting ready to graduate from high school. And then I was ready to lose another son, so to speak. And
Mm.
that's when I was working with a business coach, and he asked me if I knew what a clairaudient was, and I didn't. And that's someone who hears voices. And he said, well, keep hearing a message to give to you, and I just got to give it to you. You do with it what you want. but the voice is telling me you cannot progress any further in your life until you deal with your grief.
Hmm.
And I took that message to heart, and I immediately hired a coach to help me get through my grief. Just face it head on. I took it off the back burner, took it off a simmer, and I dealt with it head on.
Hmm.
And that's where you got the idea of coaching after having your coach and understanding what you were doing. That kind of gave you the idea, like, you know what, I want to give back. I want to help other families who are dealing with the same thing, or
Not really,
no?
surprisingly enough. In fact, that was right before I was ready to release my book. And I really felt like I was being called to write this book. But I also felt that the world of grief was too sad for me. And I just felt like, okay, God, here's your book. I did it. Now go away, right? Like I did it. And I wanted to help women. That's what I wanted to do. And every time that I would schedule, you know, a workshop or a summit or a seminar, that would fall apart and an opportunity to speak in the world of grief would come open again. So I did some praying and introspection. And I said, well, obviously this is where you want me, and I don't want to be here because it's just too painful. And I'm not a counselor. I don't have a PhD. You know, I'm not equipped to help new grievers. So why do you want me in this world, and what do you want me to do with it? And the message came back very clear. I want you on the other end. I want you shining the light on hope and healing. I want you to let people know this is possible and that it is available to them. And when they are ready, you can light their path. You can help them on this journey. And that's when I went, okay, I can do that. I can do that.
The
It's a
topics
common
that you,
theme.
yeah.
Pardon me?
No, go ahead, Paul. I was just thinking it's a very common theme with all the coaches that we talk to, that they've dealt with something like this and realized at some point, I need to help others with this same process. So it's a common theme that Paul and I hear quite often.
Yeah, but the topics that you deal with, Sherrie, on a daily basis are very emotional. So how do you, as a coach, after the day is done, lift yourself up, because you're dealing with some hard topics?
I am, but I mean, I'm not living in that space. I'm living in the space of looking out the windshield and not the rearview mirror.
Mm.
Right? I'm saying this is where we want to go. This is where we want to go. We know what happened back there. We can't go back and we can't change that. So I don't live in the in the why. I live in the what are we going to do now? What direction do we want to go now? So I really try to help people course correct in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I
it
like
does.
that. I think that's super powerful, and just giving someone a direction and being like, hey, look, this, like you said, being the light at the end of the tunnel and being like, hey, this is where we need to go. This is the end goal here, you
Right.
know, and rather than continually looking back and going, how can I deal with this? How do I get over this? And or sitting with it for years and years. So
Right.
I like that change of focus.
Right. I mean, and it's a choice,
Mm.
right? Because there are some people that are trying to drive their car constantly looking in the rearview mirror, and two things can happen. You either crash the car or you go around in this cycle of, why, and the thing with that is whatever answer you get, if you finally get your answer, it still hasn't changed anything.
Mm. Yeah. The
So where do
facts
you
are
want
still
to
the
take
same, right?
Mm-hmm.
where do you want to take this, the coaching and your business going forward?
Ultimately, what I want it to lead to is retreats where we can go to beautiful locations around the world, the mountains, the ocean, where women can gather and they have a sense of community, of people that understand, people that have been where they are, but we're holding each other's hand as we move forward. So they have that community, that encouragement of each other, and that support as we look at, because sometimes when we're in our own four walls and when we're in our own world, we're not recognizing the beauty that's out there. So we're in a beautiful location. We're exploring the beauty of the world outside while we're reviewing and exploring the beauty that exists inside and where we want to take that. And I want them to feel community and support, and I want them to have tools, and I want them to make friends with people that they know have their back, will encourage them. Because a lot of times people don't move forward because they're afraid of what everyone else is going to say. She's not grieving the way she should be grieving, or why is she moving on, or why is she doing it this way, or she's too old to be going back to school, or whatever other people are saying. This is your life, and you deserve to live it. I always tell people, I want you to live your life on purpose with passion and joy so you can make your impact on this world. Because if you're not doing that, you're not just cheating yourself, you're cheating the entire world.
I like that. I like that idea. Live your life on purpose. I think that's such a powerful message to put out there. Sherrie, what's the name of your book and how can people reach out to you?
The name of my book is How Can I Help? It's on Amazon. You can go to sherriedunlevy.com and you can get a copy of it, personalized, where I'll sign it for you. I've had a lot of people in churches, their deacons and their outreach ministry use this book as a way to reach out to the people in their community. I have people doing it as book studies. It's pretty amazing how this book is taking off. And also I have the graduating grief community as well. And if you want to find out if you're ready to graduate your grief, you can take the quiz just by going to graduatinggrief.com.
Graduatinggrief.com.
Sherrie, it sounds like you work with mostly women, but I feel like men could also benefit from your coaching. Is there a way you work with men too, or how's that work?
Well, you know what? It's so funny because when I had a radio show, it was called The Broadcast. And I would always say, this is a show from a woman's perspective, but not to the exclusion of men. And certainly there are men in graduating grief who are in my community. And I'm more than willing to help them, but I am focused on women because usually a lot of time, and women and men grieve differently, and I didn't even touch on that, but a lot of times women need that community a little more. And I feel like if I'm building these retreats, people aren't going to open up as much, among the sexes.
Sure.
So if I would do one for men, and I don't know that this would be a men's thing that they would want to do a retreat, but I feel that this is really something women would like to do and that their families would want them to do. Because sometimes we just want our moms, our daughters, our grandmothers to feel better, and to smile again. We really do want that, but they won't give themselves the permission to do that.
I'm curious then, what's the difference between the grief between a man and a woman?
A woman usually needs to tell her story over and over and over again. A woman is more open to accepting the support and help of their girlfriends. A woman is more open to crying in front of people. Men are more insulated a lot of times. When my husband and I were grieving, he grieved differently, but we had an agreement amongst ourselves that whenever one of us was having a bad day, that we were open and honest with that person and we allowed them to have their bad day instead of judging it or anything. We grieve differently. There's no right or wrong. We just grieve differently. And I might remind people that if anyone has ever lost a child, everyone wants to go to the mother, but there's a father and he's grieving too. And don't forget him.
Yeah, that's some powerful advice there. And I think you had such important insight that men and women do deal with it differently, and in those type of retreats, especially men, they don't want to share when women are around. And so having it separated into two different events, I think is the way to go. So I like everything that you shared with us, Sherrie. I think it was some amazing stuff, and hopefully people out there listening got some ideas on either how to deal with their own grief, or how to be there for someone that is dealing with the grief, or how to step into that support role, even though they don't have, an idea on how that other person's feeling. So really glad you were able to share all that with us today. So we like to wrap up the show with the title of our podcast in mind and ask these two questions. So what is one action that you would have people take right away that could make a huge difference in their lives? And it could be related with grief or not.
One of the biggest actions I think people could take right now is reach out to the strongest person that you know and ask them if they're okay.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Because, people don't check on the strong people, and strong people are just holding it together by a thread sometimes. The people that you look forward to getting the comfort from, to getting the encouragement from, check and see how they're doing.
I think that's some great advice. I think that's definitely some great advice, because like you said, people don't always check on the strong people because they're like, they got it, they're good.
Yeah.
they're the rock, right? So the other side of that are these limits. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of these self-imposed limits that we place on ourselves. What have you seen that's the most prevalent one that we need to remove immediately?
When it comes to supporting a friend that they won't notice, that there's so many people reaching out with them right now, they won't notice if I'm there. Believe me, they will. But when it comes to grieving, what I notice is that I want people to know that healing is possible. And so is a beautiful life, even after the most excruciating loss.
I like that. I like two little pieces there. The one, go ahead and reach out and give that support, regardless of how small or insignificant it might be. And then realizing that there is that light at the end of the tunnel, which you are being for everyone, Sherrie. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this. If one person got something out of this, then that's worth it, right? So absolutely. So glad that you could come and share your story and hopefully impact some people that are listening today. So thank you for coming on the show, Sherrie.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Sherrie was a great guest. I know it was kind of maybe a lower energy, episode, but I think it was something needed. And then hopefully someone out there got something out of what Sherrie was sharing with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what struck a chord with me is when you asked her the actions and limits question at the end there, and she said to reach out to the strongest person. And Justin, and you and I are coaches, and I think that a lot of people think of us that we're strong, that we're always up, that there's nothing wrong with us. And I feel like because of that, when we're down, there's less people that reach out to us because with the other people, not any fault of their own, think, well, Justin and Paul, they don't need help because they're coaches and they're fully equipped to handle whatever's going down, and that's not always the case. I mean, we're both human beings, and there's stuff that knocks us off the pedal. Yeah, we do have the tools to get us back up where we need to go, but it is nice when people reach out and say, "Hey, how you doing? Are you doing okay? You need to talk, what have you." So that was definitely something that resonated with me.
Yeah, I saw the look in your face, and it definitely resonated with me as well. Because even before being a coach, I've always been labeled by my friends and family like as the Rock. Like, Justin's steady, he's got all his stuff together. And so it does seem like in my life I have gone at solving my problems solo a lot, because not having a lot of people reach out. And so it was interesting when she said that, even in some of the groups I'm part of, still today, these different communities or support groups. And it's this idea of like, Justin's got his shit together, so he's good. We're not going to reach out to him. But so I think that was a powerful thing for her to put out there. And so hopefully people do reach out to that quote unquote strong person in their life to make sure that they're doing okay, because, and I'm sure we could go down the whole mental health route. There's people that you would never assume that would commit suicide or something like that. And they're like, but they were the strongest person I knew. Like, they had their stuff together, they were on point, but then all of a sudden, they hurt themselves, and it's because no one asked. So definitely some great insight. So glad that Sherrie could come on. I'm glad you brought her on the show with us, Paul. So I think she shared a lot of great insight with us today. So glad to have her on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's wrap up the show with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. Make sure to continue to send your questions into the actionsandlimits@gmail.com to get your questions featured on the show. Paul, you said you found one in the emails that sounded good for today.
I did. This is from Samuel in California, and he says, Paul, where does your passions come from? And for me, my passions come from my heart, truly. I have a passion to help people. I've always had. Even, when I'm watching movies, I love the inspirational stories. And I love when I'm talking to random people on the street and they have a high inspirational goal. Like if they say they want to be an actress, they want to be CEO, they want to be president of the United States. Mm-hmm. I love people that have those dreams. Because so often we deal with people that they say to themselves they want to be practical, and they don't want to go after that because that's not practical. And I think to myself, why not? Why not give it a go? Why not sell out and give it all you got? And if it doesn't pan out the way you want it to pan out, all well. A lot of times when you do that, you'll find your true passion. Sometimes when you want to become president of the United States, you get into the middle of it, and that may not be what you want to do, and it might go and take you to another route, or you CEO or actress or actor or anything. So it's comes from the fire in my belly, Samuel.
I like that question, and I know that you definitely like the underdog stories. So, oh man, you just have my brain going about different movies or different ideas about pushing through that and trying different things. So yeah, great question. Thank you guys for continually sending in your questions to the show. I always like it when we get some good thought-provoking questions for Paul to answer. So another great week, Paul. I know it, like I said, a little bit lower energy episode, but I think that there was a lot to take away from what Sherrie had to offer. So, but another great episode, man.
That's right. For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.